Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast Houston, it was a wet week in Houston, but the news was still coming in hot. Like Metro shutting down a major project that voters already approved. Plus, we learned about an unnecessary barrier for people to get justice. And why was Mayor Whitmire's administration working so hard to keep a study on a popular street safety improvement project from being released to the public? Houston Landing's diverse communities reporter Monique Welch and Pulitzer Prize finalist Evan Mintz joined me to recap the news. It's Friday, June 21st. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Monique, Evan, happy Friday. How's everybody doing?
Doing good.
I'm doing great. A little damp, but we could use the rain.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before it gets even hotter. How are we feeling about the midweek day off? How was it for everybody?
I'm one of those fools who didn't take Thursday off at work, but I figure like my kids are at camp, my wife's at work, like I'll hold down and then save that extra vacation day for later in the year. But I think it's great that we've got Juneteenth off. You know, it's a real holiday. And now I'm looking at all those other months where we don't have a 3-day weekend.
Yeah, so you were trying to parlay that Wednesday off into a Thursday off and then going right into a Friday off?
We do summer Fridays in my office where we got every other Friday off. So I've got people here in my office who've turned this into a 5-day weekend. Like, that's brilliant.
Smart.
And then if you really want to, like, you can really jump in and like try to bridge that to July 4th if you want to use a whole bunch of PTO. And you're basically French at that point. Like, you're just taking off a month during the summer.
Oh, that's not good. I'm sure the coworkers do not appreciate that. How about you, Monique? How was your midweek off?
Initially it was kind of awkward and weird. You're used to like a Monday or a Friday off and kind of going right into a 3-day weekend. But it was nice. Get a little midweek break. I feel rejuvenated and, ready to continue the week.
Absolutely. And we're here now. So let's jump into it and get that rejuvenated energy and start us off. Monique, what was your biggest story of the week?
Yeah, my biggest story of the week was actually by one of my colleagues, McKenna Oxenden, interpreters and the cost of them and the lack of availability of them in Harris County civil courts. For me, this was kind of a concern because their interpreters typically provided solely for criminal cases versus civil court cases. And so in this story, she kind of looked at how Harris County will provide the free interpreters, again, for those criminal cases. And it's almost like a denial for interpreters for civil cases. And it's to the point where it's become so routine that a lot of legal advocates and lawyers say that they don't even like submit requests anymore because they just assume and know that they're not going to get approved. So in a place like Harris County, where we have over nearly 5 million people and 145 different languages spoken here, it's kind of a big deal that this isn't provided for free like it is in civil cases, like it is in criminal cases. And then the lack thereof, there's roughly only like 92 court certified interpreters anyway. So you can just think about those numbers and kind of the obvious barrier that presents. And language access is a big deal here in Harris County. And so just knowing that barrier exists, it can prevent a lot of people from getting equal justice.
Monique, is this unique to Houston or not?
Yes and no. There have been like a lot of lawsuits against this. There was Fort Bend County that faced an investigation into this. But a lot of it really just comes down to the availability that poses this barrier for non-English speakers. And typically with this, like a lot of like county commissioners, Adrian Garcia and Leslie Briones, they said the problem has long been on their radar and they're a little worried about it. And a little fearful also that if the county doesn't do something about it, they could eventually face a federal investigation. Back in like 2010, there was a lawsuit against them, but even then, their hands are still kind of tied and they're somewhat limited because they can develop a policy, but it's still up to courts and judges to actually implement it. So it's not a guarantee that it will actually be implemented if commissioner's court does go ahead and approve a policy.
Wow, that is wild to hear.
I mean, there's the saying, you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. And just that you may be entitled to justice on paper. People are entitled to rights, but making that actually happen is always a challenge. I remember being in the prosecutor's office, and we'd be there every morning, people showing up in these misdemeanor courts, and inevitably someone would stand up and say, I know my rights and I'm entitled to an attorney. Where's my attorney? Oh, well, do you really need an attorney? Can you actually afford it? The judge would ask people, do you have stereo equipment you can hawk? Do you have jewelry you can sell to afford an attorney? And just the actual guarantees of justice in America are much higher than I think people make it seem on like Law and Order or other TV shows. It's depressing.
For my family, I'm going to speak about this, and this doesn't have to do with court, but more through the immigration process. We moved here as immigrants from Karachi, Pakistan. So, we grew up in this school system. So my siblings and I, we spoke English and we could, communicate, but my parents weren't as comfortable. So anytime we had to go deal with any kind of immigration process, we would have to take the day off from school because we were the interpreters and we were the ones communicating for our parents. And when you think about it in the court system, like how hard is that some families don't have that, right? Or they can't have their kids take off, or their kids might not be comfortable, or family members or friends. So yeah, it's just heartbreaking to hear.
Well, let's think about that too, like a kid trying to translate court information.
Yeah.
Or just something as simple as a bill. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I wouldn't be able to do that regardless of the language. That's just, difficult stuff that is typically left up to adults to understand. I probably wouldn't even know what I was talking about.
Yeah, definitely read that story. It's linked in our show notes. There are so many different angles from this, including when clients don't feel heard by the courts. And that was a really eye-opening part of the story that I really encourage everyone to check out. Evan, how about you? What was your biggest story?
Well, I think the biggest story this week is from Axios Houston reporting that Houston Public Works has finally released its report on 11th Street. Now, we've been talking about this a lot. And for those who don't remember, 11th Street was rebuilt from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane with a center turn lane and bike lanes. And it was pretty controversial. A lot of folks who lived in the neighborhood didn't like it. They said it was making traffic worse. It wasn't making anything better. Nobody was using the bike lanes. But these new official findings showed that the rebuild worked. There are fewer and less severe crashes. More people are using the trail crossings that were installed. And overall, like the social costs of the crashes that have been happening on 11th Street plummeted from 1.5 million in 2019 to 268,000 in 2023. Meanwhile, transit time to drive up and down that stretch is basically unchanged, although the report admits that if you look at people lining up at traffic signals, notably at Yale Street, it looks longer, but the amount of time it actually takes to drive around is unchanged. What is really interesting about this story is that they've had this report since March, and the mayor's office had been fighting releasing the report to the public. But I have to give credit to Heights resident and Safe Streets advocate Emmanuel Nunez, who had requested it under open records laws in February, and we finally have it now.
Why was the mayor's office fighting this report coming out?
I don't know. I think we can speculate on it, but I've got to say the mayor had taken a skeptical look at this sort of project and any sort of project where you reduce the number of lanes. And I think nobody wants to be seen as wrong, but conservatives like to say facts don't care about your feelings. People may not like it, but we've got some good data. If you don't like this research, try to do some of your own. But I really think the next steps are to try to find other places in the city where we could do similar rebuilds that make streets safer for everyone.
That was going to be my next question. Based on this report, Evan, what happens with future projects? Do you think they're greenlit a little bit easier, less pushback from the office, or is it still going to be, we need more research?
I mean, the mayor, to his credit, has given a thumbs up to the Shepherd-Durham rebuild, which reduces from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. So that's good stuff. But he's really skeptical of anything that seems to make it harder to drive. And I think what this report shows is that projects that on their surface may seem like they make traffic worse actually don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know this project has had a lot of mixed opinions, but it's pretty interesting and cool that, it's coming to show and prove that, hey, this wasn't fully a bad idea. I think when we look at Houston is so often viewed as a car city only. And just the proof is in the pudding here that it actually worked and that it could cater to both motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists. It's kind of a diverse project, if you will. And I think this is a good example of what Houston can achieve.
I mean, I think people just need to get in their minds that projects are not zero sum. You can build things that are better for people on foot, on bikes, walking around, and are also better for people in cars because nobody wants to get in a car crash. And anything that reduces the chances of you getting in a car crash are going to be good for people in cars.
All right, my biggest story, Evan, is going to stick with transportation and in a not so surprising move because Metro had already taken the project down from their website. Metro has officially shelved the University Bus Rapid Transit Project, or referred to as University BRT. And it was announced this week that they would not seek federal grant funding for the 25-mile-long line that would connect the city to 4 major universities and colleges. In News 88.7's reporting by Adam Zuvanich, Metro said moving forward with the project would, quote, financially impact Metro's day-to-day operations and severely limit the ability to implement essential services such as increased public safety, bus frequency, bus and train cleanliness, improved bus shelters, and enhanced sidewalks and roadways, end quote. The decision to shelve the University Corridor project does not have an impact on other bus rapid transit projects in the works, like the Inner Katy BRT and Gulfton BRT projects, according to Metro spokesperson Doug Delaney.
You know, Metro Next is now Metro Next. I think that the university line would have been a critical connection between Uptown and the medical center, 2 major employment hubs. It would have run through Greenway Plaza. I mean, if you're just kind of designing a good transit system on paper, this is what you want to do. At the same time, there are legitimate questions. The thing goes far beyond those places. It was very expensive. Metro doesn't have the borrowing capacity that it's had in the past. Costs are up. Ridership is down. You know, I would hope that they'd come back and say, let's try to scale this down a little bit and just connect these key business centers. But I don't see that type of attitude coming out of Metro right now. I mean, voters overwhelmingly approved this project. They've approved billions in bonding capacity. And now what? Like, how do voters not have their voice in this?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree. Like you said, voters overwhelmingly approved this, but it was 5 years ago. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't here 5 years ago. But, you know, just voting that long ago, you might have forgotten about this. And so now to hear that it's in flux, it's delayed, it's not going to happen, that could raise some frustration, you know, amongst Houstonians when you get so excited about something passing the way it did and coming at a later date. I mean, I think we're all familiar with these projects. We know they take time, but 5 years, you know, is kind of a long time. So 5 years and there's no progress, there's stallment. That's certainly frustrating. The first thing that I thought was like, okay, well, what happens to the bonds that, you know, we're talking $3.5 billion in bond initiative. So that's a lot of money. That was my first thought is like, okay, what happens to these bonds? We actually had a really good, my colleague Tim Carlin had a really good explainer on this. He talked to 2 financial experts that kind of said, well, they didn't officially sell the bonds yet. They didn't issue them. So it's almost like they were still an idea and they didn't fully exist yet. Yeah. So that kind of offers a bit of relief, but it's still like, okay, how long is this going to be delayed? You know, like Metro owes some type of explanation as to when voters can get excited about this again.
I mean, let's be honest, this has been delayed for more than 20 years. Voters approved some sort of university light rail line in 2003. Like, when are we going to get this thing? At the same time, I can't help but look at TxDOT expanding I-45, doing all of their freeway projects with unchecked funds direct from the rainy day fund under a constitutional amendment. It's almost impossible to stop these things. There's no oversight and there's no questions asked about the cost benefit analysis there. But with any transit project, every little thing gets scrutinized. There are so many levers to stop the process. Sometimes I wish things were flipped around.
Hey, speaking of scrutiny, did you see that former Mayor Sylvester Turner on X? He's been so active and is a really fun follow. He X'd or tweeted, again, we got to just call it Twitter. I don't know why I called it X, but he said Metro's decision not to move forward on the university line is a major setback to public transit for Houston and will leave nearly $1 billion in federal dollars on the table. And he followed up by saying, this is a huge blow to Metro Next and the voters. And if you criticize former Mayor Turner on X, it's hilarious because he'll just say, you need help. And that's it. He'll shut the conversation down. So look, there's critique coming from all sides now on this project being shut down. Houston's original neighborhood downtown is for everyone, and it's poppin'. It's our open-hearted home for our biggest celebrations and our treasured hidden gems. From the world-class theater district to incredible green spaces like Discovery Green, downtown is the place to be. In fact, more people visited downtown Houston last year than the entire population of Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio combined. There's no better time to live downtown than now. From starter apartments to luxury lofts, everyone can take advantage of the arts, business, culture, entertainment, food, and recreation. Now, you might think of downtown as only the heartbeat of Houston's regional economy, which it is, but there's so much more to it, including free events throughout the week with Downtown Houston Plus. From the summer trivia nights at Trailblazers Park to 713 Day at Market Square Park on July 13th, you can find something to do and eat and watch in downtown Houston. Learn more at downtownhouston.org. Downtown Houston, get energized and revived.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
All right, let's get to our most overlooked story. Monique, start us off.
So, Raheel, I think you'll like this one because I know you live in Fort Bend County, but if you're familiar, they're going to break ground soon this summer on a new landmark $10 million project to properly memorialize African Americans that have contributed to the area there and in Kendleton to kind of properly honor them. If you're familiar with Bates Allen Park, there are two cemeteries and they're pretty dilapidated historical freedmen's burial sites, and they will soon be an African American memorial. I got a chance to talk with Precinct 4 Commissioner Dexter McCoy. Very passionate project of his, just growing up in the area. He said he really didn't learn much about this history at all. And it was in his very own backyard. So he's like, now kids like me will have the opportunity to grow up and hear about this history that's so in close proximity to where they grew up. The actual memorial, it's going to be about 36 acres in total once it's done, and it's going to take two cemeteries, Newman Chapel Cemetery and the Oak Hill Cemetery, and put them into walking trails and reflection spaces. And if you haven't seen the rendering, it's going to be really nice by the time it's all said and done. But I did get a chance to speak with some descendants and some family members and relatives. We walked the cemeteries, and you could just see how some of the tombstones and headstones were just holed up by other rocks and just not in any respectable state that you would probably want to be buried in, or any of your loved ones, rather. So they were really excited and kind of felt like it was long overdue, and really said it feels like retribution if you think about the neglect that this site has endured over the last several years.
Yeah, Monique, I was reading your story, and at one point I learned that they ran cattle through the cemetery and broke up a lot of the headstones and, of course, the years of neglect. But now, once this project is done, this is going to serve as almost a must-see project to learn about the history, and it's going to bring a lot of people to the area as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dexter McCoy said he envisions this to be a huge economic driver for not just the county, but the state, the nation. He expects hundreds of thousands of people to flock to this area each year, and particularly on Juneteenth. You know, it was originally supposed to break ground on Juneteenth, but we all know we got a little bit of weather that canceled a bunch of events this week. So it's going to come at a later date this summer, but they're expecting big crowds of people to flock to the area for this.
I can't wait for that project to be unveiled officially. That's going to be a huge thing out here in Fort Bend for us. And of course, as you mentioned, as the state as a whole. Okay, I'm going to get to my most overlooked one. And this is a quick one for all my parents out there. We love affordability in Houston. And a new report by Smart Asset is celebrating just that, because the greater Houston area came in as one of the most affordable major metros in the U.S. with a number of $21,000 a year to raise a child, with $10,000, by the way, going to childcare. Now, the average cost of raising a child in the U.S. is right above $25,000, and Houston was ranked number 38 out of 50. Evan, do you feel it? Do you feel like it's affordable out here?
I've only ever been in Houston, so I don't have much like to compare to in terms of affordability. The thing that makes Houston affordable to me is I've got two sets of grandparents here. So like the child care help, the help when we go on vacations, all that stuff, like that's where it's at. I could be living in like Tokyo or New York City or wherever, like incredibly expensive place. But as long as I've got grandparents there, like it's fine.
Yeah, I wonder what that number is around the Houston area, because I'm thinking about all of my friends, and most of our parents still live here. We all grew up here. We, for the most part, stayed around here, right? So, yeah, I wonder how much that helps as well. Because when I talk to my friends who live in Chicago, DC, New York, LA, I hear stories of fear and terror when it comes to childcare. Like these daycare centers out in those areas are so expensive. They won't accept a lot of students. It's just scary. Out here, you can relatively easily find childcare, and even out here, it's getting a little bit harder. But man, just when you look at some of the other numbers, and I've linked that whole story, you can see that it is outrageous. Mm-hmm. And food costs were calculated in this, and I'm thinking about my oldest daughter right now, and she's 9 years old. That food cost is about to go out the roof when she hits those teenage years. So I think that number is going to change a little bit for me. Evan, what was your most overlooked story?
Well, my most overlooked story is that Tropical Storm Alberto brought a 4-foot storm surge to Surfside Beach. The Boulevard Ferry had to be shut down. Nassau Bay's David Braun Park was flooded, even though the tropical storm landed in northwest Mexico. That's how far away it was to have all these impacts on our region. Now, imagine how bad it would be if the storm landed anywhere near us. This is a reminder that we need to build coastal storm surge protection like the Ike Dike to protect our region and protect critical energy infrastructure in Galveston Bay from a storm surge. The Port of Houston provides more than $1 billion a day in economic value. The Houston metro area alone is responsible for 15% of the nation's oil refinery capacity. If that gets shut down by a storm surge, you are seeing gas prices skyrocket across the country. You are seeing travel prices skyrocket for planes. Everything is going to get more expensive. Investing now saves us in the long run, and this little storm surge here should be the warning we need. Don't overlook it.
So we are moving forward on the Ike Dike. The design phase is underway as of right now, kind of. What is the latest, Evan?
I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers is still working on their design. We've got money to do some assessment work. There's other storm surge work being done up and down the coast. But this is the sort of stuff where you need Congress to have a fire lit under their butts and say the usual regulations and red tape that get in the way of building any infrastructure in the United States needs to be cut, because the timeline for this thing is 20 years. We need to make it as short as possible, because every hurricane season is us rolling the dice.
Perfectly said, Evan. Let's get to your moment of joy, Monique, because you guys are working kind of hand in hand here.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up with Evan, I consider myself and Houston in general blessed because we kind of dodged a bullet this time. I think anytime you hear rain or potential flooding coming, everyone just kind of like clenches. It's like, oh boy, is this going to be a repeat of the floods we've seen? Is it as big as Harvey? Like your gauge of, okay, how detrimental can this potentially be? You're always a little fearful of that. So I'm just glad that it was just a little light rain, at least in the majority of the Houston area. We kind of missed that a bit, but it also cooled off for us a great deal. And summers in Houston are brutal. So I'm glad to get this reprieve. So that's my moment of joy.
Yep, we'll have some lows in the 70s to start the day, and then we'll be right back into the mid-90s. So there is that over the weekend. It will be a little bit cooler, but hey, it's just going to be humid and hot. It's Houston summers. Let's enjoy it.
Even if it's short-lived, we'll take it.
Absolutely. Evan, what was your moment of joy?
My moment of joy was watching my wife be on TV this week on Fox 26's morning show on Monday. She was on talking about Inside Out 2. My wife is a child psychologist, and she was using this as an opportunity to discuss how parents can use this movie to discuss with their kids about anxiety and stress and how to deal with it. I mean, I think kids out there, particularly with the rain falling, start to stress out about things. If you've experienced one flood, any raindrop has that anxiety in your mind bouncing around. So we've got the link in the show notes. Go watch it.
I'm so excited to watch Inside Out 2 with my daughter. And, as I mentioned, she's 9 years old. And I know this one tackles puberty, and anxiety is a new emotion that is introduced into the movie. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to introduce her to the thought of puberty just yet. I know we're going to have that talk, and she's going to go through those changes. But at 9 years old, I'm like, maybe we'll hold off on Inside Out 2 for a while.
I mean, either way, it's a good movie.
All right, I'm going to end it here with my moment of joy, and this comes from Ariana Garcia at Cron.com. The first full moon of the summer, which is also commonly known as the strawberry moon, will reach its peak illumination tonight around 8:20 p.m. And it's taking place on the longest day of the year, aka the summer solstice. And that occurs when the sun is at its highest point of the year, meaning June's full moon will appear significantly lower and larger in the sky. So you're going to get this moon illusion. It's going to be so intense. Make sure you're outside and you appreciate tonight's strawberry moon / summer solstice get together. It's going to be intense. So enjoy that. Enjoy your weekend. And thank y'all so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, chat with y'all next time.
That was Houston Landing's diverse communities reporter Monique Welch and Pulitzer Prize finalist Evan Mintz. And with that, we're done for the week on CityCast Houston. Our executive producer is Laura Eisensee. Our producer is Carleon Jones. Our newsletter editor is Brooke Lewis, and I'm your host, Raheel Ramzanali. Our music is by the band All the Kimonos. We'll be back on Monday to talk about how a community radio show paved the way for radical acceptance for Houston's LGBTQ community. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Any follow-up? We'll go to the next one if not.
I could talk all day, but I don't want to use up our time.
I know.